So good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the Heart Gallery's first webinar of the year, our Wendy's Wonderful Kids overview. We're very grateful to have you here. If this is your first time or if you're coming back from last year, thank you again for being here today. And today we're extremely grateful to have Natalie Adams with us today. Natalie is the Director of Trainings for the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. After Natalie's presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, so I'll save those questions. But you can also wait till the end and come off mute and ask them directly. And then I'll also be following up with everybody on this call after the webinar just to provide resources and contact information. But thank you all so much for being here today, and please welcome Natalie. So go ahead, Natalie, take it away.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I want to thank you all for taking the time, spending your lunch hour with me to learn more about our Wendy's Wonderful Kids program and the work of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Just like Cassandra said, I have about 15 minutes of content, and then we'll save questions and discussion for the end. So during our hour, we will discuss the mission and the work of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. We will also discuss the differences between our child-focused recruitment model and other types of recruitment models out there, and then dive deep into all 8 key components of our child-focused recruitment model. So again, thank you so much for being with me today. My name is Natalie Adams. I am the Director of Training at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, where I oversee the training team who are responsible for the delivery and of curriculum involving our child-focused recruitment model, as well as delivering curriculum on other foster care and adoption related topics to child welfare professionals, legal professionals, or any other stakeholders across North America. My child welfare career spans over 24 years, which is just crazy to say out loud. And I have served as a child welfare caseworker, a supervisor, a meeting facilitator, of course, a trainer, a program manager, and policy developer. So my passion is truly grounded in the belief that all children deserve to grow up in a safe, stable, and permanent home. And I really do apply, I'm sure like all of you, apply that value with me in every aspect of my work. It's also my pleasure to introduce some of my colleagues on the meeting today. Wendy's Wonderful Kids Director, Mervet Sa, and Senior Adoption Program Manager, Sarah Kroboth. They provide technical assistance and support to the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program in Texas. I want to just jump in by sharing a bit of history of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption and how the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program started. Our mission is to dramatically increase the number of adoptions as well as other legal permanency outcomes of children waiting in North America's foster care systems. We are singularly focused on finding permanency for youth in care, and we firmly believe that every child is adoptable, regardless of their age, regardless of their special need or placement type. And it all started with this man right here. Some of you might recognize him. Dave Thomas was adopted as an infant. He was in kinship care and used his platform through Wendy's to encourage others to adopt. In 1992, he established the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And in 2003, the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption Canada was formally incorporated. And this is why these numbers on the screen is why all of us are on this call today, and why we are all committed to the youth that we're serving. Because as we sit here right now, over 430,000 children are waiting in foster care. And of that number, over 140,000 youth are waiting to be adopted right now. And sadly, every year, over 20,000 youth age out of care every year without a family. And you are likely familiar with these stats on the slide that you see here. We know all too well that youth who emancipate from foster care are often at higher risk for negative outcomes, the outcomes you see on the screen. That approximately 20% of foster youth nationwide reported that they had been homeless within 2 to 4 years of exiting care. that the unemployment rate of foster care alumni is around 50%. Less than 3% of teens who age out of foster care will earn a college degree. And 70% of females will become pregnant by the age of 21, many of which end up back in the child welfare system, repeating those generational cycles. And sadly, 1 in 4 youth will experience post-traumatic stress disorder, a stat equal or higher than our US military veterans. And not to mention the financial pressures placed on society. For every young person that ages out of care, taxpayers pay around $300,000 in social costs. And that includes things like public assistance, lost wages, or involvement in the criminal system or the child welfare system. And we have to keep in mind that the majority of these youth likely had independent living services or emancipation services before they aged out, which just tells us that independent living isn't enough. One of the biggest indicators of being successful after emancipating from the system is having a family to support them. So typically there are 3 types of business as usual methods and recruitment strategies to get youth adopted. The first one is general recruitment. That's just general awareness. It's letting the public know, hey, there are youth in foster care that are available for adoption. And then there's child-specific recruitment, and that's probably what most of us are familiar with. This usually includes a picture and description of the youth that are displayed for the public. So with this type of recruitment, as you well know, you are putting the youth's information out to the public and hoping the right family sees this information and reaches out to you with interest in adoption. And then there's targeted recruitment. This is where a specific group of people are approached based on interests or characteristics of the youth. And to better serve older youth and youth with special needs, the foundation implemented a 4th recruitment strategy called child-focused recruitment. So a key part of our evidence-based child-focused recruitment model calls for adoption professionals that we refer to as recruiters to build a strong and trusting relationship with the youth that they're serving. The foundation has seen that for young people who say they are initially completely opposed to permanency, it is their relationship with their Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter that can help them work through any fears or misconceptions that they have around permanency, resulting in them being more open to permanency. You have to understand that the underlying fear of a lot of these youth is that no one will want them. And that fear is reaffirmed by the reality that many of these youth have been in care for years and no one has stepped forward to adopt them. So child-focused recruitment focuses on finding the right family for the child. Instead of working to find the right child for the family, Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters strive to find the right family for the child. And they do this by utilizing existing connections and by talking to people who already have known or maybe currently have a relationship with the youth. By doing this, that increases the youth's comfort level and then the family's comfort level with adoption because everybody likely already knows each other. And if family reunification is a safe option, a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter will explore it always. Child-focused recruitment is also rooted in the belief that every child is adoptable. That's in our mission statement. Our recruiters work with smaller caseloads of around 12 to 15 children to ensure that every child deserves the time and resources and support that they deserve. It really allows recruiters to get to know these youth and then diligently search for the right family to meet their specific needs. What makes the child-focused recruitment model different from other recruitment strategies out there is that we focus on our diligent search component. And I'll spend time talking with you about what that looks like. Finding those who have already have connections or have had relationships with the youth. Even if a family cannot be considered for placement, they still have valuable information that can help with the process, including recruitment, adoption readiness, and adoption preparation. The relationship component, you'll hear me say this a lot today, is one of the most important aspects in our model. Youth are also at the center of everything that we do. This process is truly done with them, not to them. Wendy's Wonderful Kids was established in 2004 with only 7 sites across the United States. And by 2007, we had a footprint in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and our program launched in Canada. So through Wendy's Wonderful Kids, the foundation funds adoption professionals, again, we call them recruiters, to use and implement our child-focused recruitment model to find permanent homes for our youth and our focused population, which I'll talk about in a few slides. While there are Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters working all across the United States and Canada to find permanent homes for children in foster care, there aren't currently enough recruiters to serve every child in our focused population of teenagers, children with special needs, and siblings. Often our recruiters are concentrated typically around larger cities where there are more children waiting in care. And that's why the foundation is actively working to scale Wendy's Wonderful Kids in all 50 states and Canada to ensure there is a child in to serve every child in need. So you'll see on this map, currently we are scaled or scaling in 21 states and provinces across the United States and Canada. We have over 575 adoption recruiters and supervisors out there serving youth, implementing our child-focused recruitment model. And we are so proud and thrilled and that we are currently celebrating over 15,000 adoptions since the creation of the program. The first Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter in Texas started in 2006. And since then, the foundation has partnered with several regions to continue expanding the program to 34 current recruiters, which is just amazing. The graphic in this map shows areas that are currently scaled or scaling. Areas with gray stripes are regions where contract proposals are still pending. Currently, we have Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters in regions 2, regions 3E, regions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. To date, we are currently have served just over 1,000 youth in Texas through Wendy's Wonderful Kids. Currently, there's just over 400 children on Wendy's Wonderful Kids caseloads. And then the state of Texas and the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program is so excited that they have celebrated 500 finalizations. And that includes adoptions, legal guardianships, and reunifications. So after our program launched in 2004, we really wanted to know, truly, does it work? And we found it really does. A 5-year rigorous evaluation of our adoption recruitment model began in 2006 and concluded in 2010. And this independent research was conducted by Child Trends in Washington, D.C., comparing our child-focused recruitment model to other traditional recruitment models out there that I spoke about a few slides ago. So at its conclusion, the model was proven up to be 3 times more effective at serving children who had been in foster care the longest, including teenagers, children with special needs, and sibling groups. To date, it is one of the only evidence-based recruitment models out there. Not only were children served by Wendy's Wonderful Kids more likely to get adopted, the study also found that older youth who were opposed to permanency were more likely to consider adoption and permanency when working with their Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter. Because this is because, again, these recruiters really spend a lot of time building a relationship with the youth and preparing them along their permanency journey. So this graphic on the slide is our child-focused recruitment model. There are 8 main components of the model. Notice the youth is at the center of everything that we do. Our first component is the initial child referral, and this is where the recruiter will reach out to the child's custodial worker, introduce themselves in their role, and gather initial information about the child. The case record review happens when the recruiter reviews everything in the youth's case file. And when I say everything, I mean everything, taking note of any connections that they've had, past or present. And this is typically done within the first 30 days after the referral. Our third component is the relationship with the child, and this is a very important aspect of our work because it's where the recruiter will begin building a trusting relationship with the youth in order to understand, where they are. What is their understanding of permanency? Do they have any fears or misconceptions about permanency? They also take this opportunity to learn who is important to that youth and what they want for their life. Recruiters are required to meet with the youth at least once a month. Our fourth component is our diligent search, and that happens when a recruiter identifies and contacts people that the youth has had connections to. And this is an ongoing effort until a match is made. Network building involves everyone who supports and works with the youth. This will ultimately help the team achieve permanency faster and create a natural organic support system around the youth and the permanent family. The assessment of adoption readiness is where the recruiter will determine if there are any needs that need to be addressed prior to finalization. And then adoption prep is where the recruiter assures that the child is ready for this adoption process, and then the family is able to meet the child's needs on an ongoing basis. And finally, our recruiters create an individualized recruitment plan that are based on the child's needs and composed by those found throughout the diligent search efforts. So you've heard me refer to our focus population several times throughout the presentation, but on the slide you will see the youth that we typically work with. We work with children ages 9 or older. We work with children who are a part of sibling groups, children with special needs, children who are opposed to adoption. So those children who are asked if they want to be adopted and they say no, we work with those children. We want to work with those children. We work with children in long-term foster care as well. We do not, however, work with youth who already have an identified permanent family, because we want our recruiters to spend time recruiting for those youth, those 20,000 youth who age out of care every year without a family. That's where we target our efforts. So I would love to have you all come to our 2-day training where we dive deep into, for our recruiters, where we dive deep into every component of our child-focused recruitment model, but we only have a little bit of time. So I want to share several components, take a closer look at several components to help you better understand what sets our model apart from other types of recruitment strategies out there. So the first one is our third component, and that is the relationship with the child. And just like I said a few minutes ago, this component of the model focuses on building a strong and trusting relationship with the youth. By establishing this connection, recruiters can work very closely with the child to uncover any fears that they have and understand their goals and wants. It's really about becoming a dedicated advocate for the youth and offering unwavering support throughout the process. So to build a strong relationship with the youth, recruiters meet with them on a monthly basis. And the model emphasizes in-person visits whenever possible, because we all know, we've worked with teens or older youth. This is the most effective way to foster a trusting and open relationship. You know, our youth have been in care forever, for a long time, and they see many child welfare professionals throughout their time in foster care. So we really want to demonstrate to them that we are in it with them, that we care about them, and that's why we are so invested in building a strong and open relationship with the youth. And we do know that that takes time. What makes the role of the recruiter unique from other child welfare professionals is that their sole focus is legal permanency, whereas a typical child welfare caseworker, I'm sure you all know, they have multiple responsibilities because they're in charge of the entire case management of the case. Our recruiters work with smaller caseloads so they can spend a little bit more time with the youth and invest in that relationship component of it. Trust and openness are really essential for recruiters to understand the youth on a deeper level, address and work through any fears that they might have, explore their wants and needs, and discuss the important people in their lives. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but I know a lot of us have in the child welfare community, where we've worked with older youth who say, no, absolutely not. I do not want to be adopted. I'm sure I can't see you all, but I'm sure there is people nodding their heads in the audience today. Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters expect youth on their caseloads to be hesitant, even fully opposed to the idea of permanency. Many times it's because youth have faced multiple uncertainties, unknowns, disappointments, making it very difficult, and let's be honest, really, really scary to see past their present situation. But the youth's desire to consider permanency is not a prerequisite from being served by our program. Again, we want to work with those youth. Because in our experience, when a child says, I don't want to be adopted, I don't believe in permanency, when we go deeper, we find there are fears and a lack of understanding about what adoption is and what being a part of a family can be like. Our recruiters are charged with working with you to discover what those fears and misconceptions are and work on approaches to get beyond the no, unpack the no, while educating them on the benefits of a family. It's important to remember that at this stage, our youth may not be ready for finalization. And we aren't expecting that they would be. We're asking them only at this stage to be open to recruitment efforts. That preparation for finalization can't happen until a match is made. So, what's important to remember is just because a youth says no doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to explore permanency for them. We have had youth say that they have been asked once if they would like to be adopted, and that one answer has changed the trajectory of their lives. And when you think about it, all of us, when we are asked something that is pretty serious and definitely serious about where you're going to live and where you're going to belong, if you don't have all the information, you're likely going to say no. So it's almost like a healthy response when they have more information. When we think about our own experiences, when we have more information, we're likely to make an informed decision. So we really need to educate them on the benefits of the family. Talk through with them what they would like to see for their future and who in their lives can help them get there. So on this slide, you'll see some of the most common fears and common reasons why a youth will say no to the idea of permanency. Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters are expected to work with youth to talk through these barriers and misconceptions they might hold. It's always important to listen to the youth's voice. Again, this process is done with them, not to them. So we want to hear their voice, but it's equally important to educate them on the decisions they're making. This is where we first challenge the no by first making sure they understand what it is they're saying no to. Because they might be saying no because they are afraid of the unknown. They might be afraid of being abused or changing schools. They might be saying no because they don't want to be separated from their siblings. They could be saying no because they're afraid that if they accept permanency in a home that isn't their biological family, that they're rejecting their family of origin and they don't want that. They're afraid of that. So that instead they would just say no. And I want to talk a little bit about normal teenage feelings of wanting to be independent, because I think this is very common for all children. I know I can speak for myself and maybe all of us as we were entering young adulthood, we had this urge to be independent. So our youth that we're serving are no different. Our kids have been in care for years, and they are finally able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They want to be in control of their own lives. And when you think about it, the child welfare system tends to give some incentives for youth that age out of care. They provide stipends or maybe a work site, maybe a job, maybe some temporary housing. So these youth see this and say, you know what, I think I just want to take my emancipation classes, my independent living classes, and aging out of the system sounds pretty good. So that's what I want to do. But what they don't understand is that we want independent living for them too. We think that all children should have independent living skills. Birth children, foster children, adopted children. They should all have the skills that they need to move from a childhood to adulthood successfully and ultimately be independent. But we all know this on the call today as independent adults. Having a family doesn't mean you can't be independent. It just means that you have someone to lean on when you need it, because independent living is a service. It is not a hoped for outcome. So what can we do when a youth says no to the idea of permanency? First and foremost, press into the answer. This is what we tell our recruiters all the time. Why specifically are they saying no? Is there anything that you as a part of their team can do to alleviate that concern? Maybe they are loving high school and they're in marching band and they're in theater and they have a great group of friends. That is typically a clue to our Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter to start those diligent search efforts within the school community. Maybe that permanent home is within that child's school community. We've also had Recruiters say that there are some members of the youth's team that aren't necessarily advocating for permanency. We commonly hear from our recruiters that they have team members say that the youth just isn't ready for permanency. So we tell them, instead of giving up at this point, ask questions to productively move the conversation forward. What does ready look like? How can we get them there? We just can't settle for the youth aging out of care. And I want to take a moment to highlight that our Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters are always recruiting for youth as they are today. We do not expect them to behave in a certain way to be worthy of a family. We have found permanent homes for youth in tremendously difficult situations. Just to give you an example, a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter worked with a youth who was in juvenile detention, and he was adopted by his attorney's paralegal. That paralegal would go out to the detention center to have the youth sign paperwork and prep him for trial, and a relationship bloomed because of that ultimately led to an adoption. So we never know what's possible or around the corner unless we try. So with your post-training materials today that Cassandra will send out, the foundation created a 7 common fears document. It will be included in your materials today. It provides a summary of concerns that our recruiters hear and gives some ideas on strategies on how to work through them. And we find it helpful, and I hope you all will find it helpful in your work as well. One key component of the child-focused recruitment model that sets it apart from other recruitment approaches out there is the diligent search process. In this step, the recruiter identifies and reaches out to individuals who have had relationships with the child. This process is informed through a very thorough case record review, where recruiters carefully note every name, past or present, in the case record, and by conversations with the youth themselves, underscoring the importance of a strong relationship with the youth. We want to make sure that the information that we're gathering is accurate and insightful information. So I want to take a minute to just review the essentials of the diligent search process and why it's such a critical component in the work that we do. So recruiters, I just said, gather information about the child and who has had a relationship with them in the past or present. So it's really just like people that they know or maybe have known. It could be distant relatives. It could be anyone really in the family, old neighbors, current or former foster parents, teachers, mentors, counselors, you kind of faith representatives, you can kind of name it. And we do this again by means of the case record review and having conversations with the youth as well as people in the child's network. Recruiters will then identify these potential, we call them permanent resources, these potential permanent resources, and determine who is who. You generally have this long list of people, of names, and then they really work with the youth and to decide who is who. And then once they determine who is who, they do this by saying, like, who does the youth relate to more? What is their current relationship? What was their relationship like previously? And then, but after they do that, prior to reaching out, the recruiter has to get and must get approval from the child's custodial caseworker. And this is why a relationship and a partnership with the child's custodial caseworker is so important, because we cannot reach out to any of these potential permanent resources without the consent and approval from the child's custodial caseworker. And once the caseworker approval is obtained, recruiters will begin contacting these potential permanent resources. And it's important to emphasize that, again, diligent search is an ongoing effort until a match is made. And now I'm excited to show you a video of Macy. She is a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter in Vermont, and she will share a story of how she used diligent search strategies to find permanency for the youth that she's serving.
Diligent search are all of your efforts to find as many relatives and connections as you can for youth in foster care. And that includes identifying, locating them, and contacting them. One of the first things I like to do is to talk to the youth themselves directly. Do you have a photo album that you could share with me? I'll ask who each person is, and then I can write down those names, ask them who's important to you, who's in your life right now. If I could find anyone, who would you want me to find? I also really like to talk to the youth birth parents about who is in their family tree. We have some excellent tools to use online. I recommend using everything that you can to try and find people. You can find lists of names and addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, social media accounts. Just by doing basic searches online, obituaries often list family and relationships and the whereabouts of those people. You're going to find a lot of people who could be related to a child. And I always recommend reaching out to every single person. So I start with sending a letter. So I like to introduce myself, what I do, and say, I'd like for you to give me a call. If I don't hear back from them, it's not necessarily because they're not picking up the phone. They could just be not calling me back. They could be talking to each other to figure out a game plan on how to address this as a family. Sometimes I'll get callbacks from lots of people saying, how can we help? Or I'm not able to help at this time. But those phone calls, when you're talking to people, are also a part of this process because you're asking some really important questions. I do all the outreach efforts that I possibly can. I follow up with emails, and I'll send a message on social media. And I found that with doing all of that work, although it's incredibly time consuming, it's worth it, and it works. You're taking a baby step toward permanency. You're creating a possible attachment and getting someone involved. And that really is a big deal. I met Maddie when she was 12 years old, living on a farm with her foster family, and told her what I do, that I look for as many family members and connections as I can. And I asked her, who would you want me to find if I could find anyone for you? And she said, my dad. I've never met him. So I walked away with that information and I started my work. I found him using these search methods and my online tools and conversations. He called me and was hesitant at first. But it turns out that all those letters that I sent to every single family member on his side of the family were received 2 weeks before a big family vacation. They went on the vacation together and were talking about it. They really supported him and encouraged him to meet her. So after his vacation, he called me again. And he said he was ready. Around that same time, heard from a couple of other family members, including his brother and his wife, Anton and DJ. So I was able to drive Maddie up to see her dad and her aunt and uncle for the first time. And when she met her dad, it was really cool because she resembles her father. After those visits, I talked with everyone and they said, we really want to do what's best for Maddie. So her father thought about it, and although he really wanted to be there for his daughter, he couldn't make it work. So I let DJ and Anton know that it wasn't going to work out for Maddie to live with her dad, and they said, we want her. What do we have to do? And that's where she is now, living on this farm with her pre-adoptive family who are her relatives. There are two major challenges that I really come across. The first one being negative biases from the people on the children's team. People get really worried when they hear that I'm finding people who the kid may not know. And they say, where have these people been? They should have reached out sooner. I don't think this is a good idea. So I like to educate those people to overcome those biases about how it's good to just get the information. The other challenge that I come across are false promises. I'm finding those family members who are very excited about their young family member and wanting to be connected, but then falsely promising to them that they're going to show up because it might not work out right away. I really like to help families slow down. This is the long game. We're going to work on this. Let's take this one step at a time. With Madison's case, one of the biggest barriers that I had was getting buy-in from the team to reach out to her father and her father's side of the family. It was really hard for the team to wrap their minds around me reaching out to this family who had never been involved. When I talked to DJ and Anton, they said, we thought that she was safe with her mom, and we wanted to be respectful. But when they heard from me and they knew that Maddie needed help, they stepped up right away. And so when I was trying to overcome that barrier with the team, I said, let's just get the information. If we decide together as a team that this isn't going to work, then we're not going to do it. But it's better to have the information to know what the options are. We had to make sure that when we're talking to the paternal relatives, that we're making sure that they are going to show up when they say they're going to, that they are consistent. And DJ and Anton did just that. They did everything that was asked of them. They jumped through every hoop, and I think they're going to continue to do that forever through adoption. I sent out so many letters. Her family tree is huge. And I reached out to every single person. Those people I did hear back from, there's a lot who are currently involved in her life. She has an aunt who likes to take her turkey hunting. She has another aunt who will have her over for weekend visits so she could see her brother. She stays in contact with her prior foster parent. And I was able to create new relationships for Madison on her father's side of the family. She's getting to know these people for the first time, and it feels really good for her. Diligent search is absolutely crucial. They deserve someone who's spending the time to find as many relatives and connections as they can, and to have an opportunity for permanency and adoption.
We were so grateful for Macy to share her story and her work with Madison, because if you hear in the video, she explains how that thorough and dedicated diligent search process ultimately helped her find Madison's permanent family. However, Macy highlights that the same process helped her identify several additional family members who Madison could build meaningful relationships with. In child welfare, and listen, I will admit this myself, sometimes we become so focused on finding the permanent family that we may overlook the importance of cultivating the child's broader support network. This network not only accelerates the permanency journey, but it also provides the child with organic, natural, lasting support. Once I heard a youth describe permanency as sitting at a table with people and no one was paid to be there. So I want to take a moment to share why Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters prioritize building the child's network. We often say it's their village, it's their people, as an intricate part of our child-focused recruitment model. So what role does the network play? Obviously, a very vital role. First, network members can offer valuable leads on potential permanent families or individuals who are ready and willing to get out there and support the child. Sometimes they can really help with the recruitment process. You have that one relative that is very involved and she might say, oh my gosh, let me reach out to Aunt May. I know her well and I could introduce you and ease you into the conversation. And it makes a big difference in building trust and facilitating communication. But here's the real value of the network. These members often have unique insights and knowledge that others might not have access to. A lot of times in child welfare, we're deficit focused, right? These youth don't have a lot of stories that aren't sad or bad and that are affiliated and associated with their removal or being separated from their family. These network members and these family members, by engaging them in the process, they can provide stories of strength. They can provide funny stories. I mean, oh my goodness, like who went to family holidays? Who celebrated birthdays? Isn't there a fun story about, Uncle John falling down at a family birthday party? All of those stories sound small, but when you think about it, it gives the youth some sense of pride. Maybe there's a skill that the family has passed down. Maybe mom was a wonderful cook and there are memories associated with that. So it gives the youth that insight by engaging those network members, gives the youth something to be proud of. Building a network isn't just about connecting people. It's really about educating those individuals in the network about the critical importance of permanency. We definitely need the youth to understand what permanency is, but it's also essential for other members of the network to be on the same page, because the network can't advocate for permanency if they aren't committed and fully bought into the process themselves. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, I'm sure if you have known nothing about our program prior to coming to this session, you can probably assess right now that a lot of the work that we're doing in our child-focused recruitment model is reaching out to families of origin. So biological family plays a huge role in the child's life and in the recruitment process. And we ask and expect our recruiters to actively engage with the youth's family for a number of reasons. Because we know that terminating the legal relationship between biological parents and the youth in no way terminates the emotional relationship. We are often working with older youth who continue to engage with their family of origin, typically through social media, through texting. So it's important to help the youth maintain these relationships in safe and appropriate ways. And I want to give you a very powerful example. We had a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter tell us that a youth on her caseload found his father on social media and began corresponding with him on a regular basis. This youth did not share this with any member of the team because he was terrified that the team would completely freak out and stop that communication. So what he did instead, he stole his foster mother's car and drove to see his father in a neighboring state. Thankfully, he was fine, no one was hurt, and everything worked out. But it just speaks to the gravity of the child's emotional relationship with his father and the lengths that he would go to see him. So facilitating that contact in a safe manner should always be explored. There have been many efforts made at the front end of the child welfare system to get youth into placement with relatives when they enter care. But it's necessary to reapproach relatives after termination of parental rights, even if those relatives had been ruled out earlier. There could be distant relatives that also were not approached when the youth came into care. The youth might not have had necessarily extensive family search efforts done on their behalf when they came into care. Relatives might not have known that the youth were in foster care. There could also have been a variety of reasons why they didn't want to become involved when the youth was placed in the care. Maybe there were safety concerns involving the youth's primary caretakers, and they didn't want to have that type of contact. But now having the TPR in place could impact the relative's ability to care for the youth in a safe way. Circumstances could also change in the family dynamic that make it possible now for these family members to now serve as a permanent placement. Maybe an older sibling was too young when their younger sibling came into care, or maybe a distant relative was out of a job when their relative came into care. Especially for those 12% of waiting youth who have been in care for over 5 years, it is crucial to reach out again after termination of parental rights. We find that many players in the child welfare system can be a little hesitant about contacting relatives, and we understand that. This could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe the family was previously contacted earlier in the case and they were ruled out, or maybe there's a bias that that apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so folks are hesitant to reach out to family members. There could be a family member who just isn't safe or appropriate. But just because a family member isn't deemed safe or appropriate doesn't mean that recruiters can't reach out to them, because they might still need this information. I want to share an example with you. We had a Wendy's Wonderful Kids sibling set of 5 who was looking for placement. Their grandfather was a registered sex offender, so obviously he was not safe or appropriate to be a placement for these kids. But the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter reached out to and met with him anyway. And then they learned through that contact of an extended aunt who was able to take placement of all 5 siblings. If the recruiter did not obtain this permission to speak to the grandfather because we knew he wasn't obviously a viable placement option, that large sibling set might not have achieved permanency with a relative. So I want to leave you with one more video before we open it up for questions and discussions. I've mentioned a few times today how important the child-focused recruitment work that we do, how the youth are so important and at the center of the work that we do at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So consistent with that, I'm going to let Keith, a youth who aged out of care, have the last word.
My name is Keith. I am 23 years old. I grew up mostly in New York City. My mother was pretty much nowhere to be found. For the first 3 years of my life, I was in foster care. And then after that, I was placed with my father. Me and my father would have very, very long arguments as we would yell so loud that the neighbors would just pretty much call the police and see what's going on. He would leave me in the house with no food. And I would basically see him come home with food with him. He would basically say, oh, this food's not for you. So I went back into foster care when I was 14. Because I was moving so much and going from home to home, I really didn't think adoption would be an option. Honestly, I just thought I was just gonna go through the system and then whatever happens, happens. As I was getting to the age 16, a family member of mine was getting more involved, but I wish they got more involved, if that makes sense. Because I wanted them to adopt me. I needed some type of stability. Just give me the home. Give me something more permanent so I don't have to keep moving around. So I currently live in Texas. I am a flight attendant. I travel the country for a living. It's like I'm the fastest packer here. Well, I learned that all during my time in foster care when I had to pack my stuff and go to this home and then that home and then that home. To be adopted would garner me the ability to not have to do that and not have to go to a home knowing that it's temporary and with the mindset of, well, this is all gonna go away, so let me not hold things dear. And I will tell you, even into my adult life, I've paid my own bills in my own apartments. And there were times when I felt like, this is all gonna go away. Let me just pay my dues and stay as long as I can and call this my room and, and on to the next. There are times where you'll have some days where you're just like, wow, I just wish I could call one person to just make this a little easier. But I couldn't. I think everyone's deserving of a part of a family. I deserved a family that was healthy, stable, resourceful, understanding, and understood that I was a kid. I want people to understand that though they're not your child, they could be your child. They are still a child. They still don't know what to do, where to go, who to get where from. Be that person. Please don't sit around and wait for them to just figure it out. There are a lot of kids that are deserving of a parent that cooks food when they get home, makes up your bed, or tells you to make up your bed, washes your clothes, or teach you how to wash your clothes, wash the dishes for you, and then eventually tell you to wash dishes. You know what that does? That gives them grace. That gives them hope. That gives them understanding of what real love looks like, what true love looks like from a parent. So they won't have to go out there and look for it for themselves, and then they meet the wrong people, and then guess what? They're a statistic. I wish I didn't have to fight that way. I wish I didn't have to grind and grind as a teenager to try to look for something that should have already been there. I experienced what I thought was love in the wrong way by the wrong people. Miss White, she was a drug prevention counselor. She's been alive for over 10 years. Miss Baker, she was one of the first people in my school to find out I was in foster care. They made me who I am today. So to even think about people like her or Miss White to like adopt me as a permanent family, looking back at it, that would have been amazing. You know, I'm glad that they're still a part of my life, even as an adult, but I wish, damn.
We are so grateful that Keith and other youth are willing to share their stories with us in such a moving and profound way. If you are interested in learning more about the foundation and hearing about more stories like Keith, you are welcome to visit our website at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, or excuse me, the davethomasfoundation.org. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to learn about the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program and the work of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And now we can open it up.